So despite the widely held stereotype now that millennials were living in this sort of earnest utopia, the reality for most millennials was that as young people, they were inheriting one of the worst economies of the modern era. Because if there's one defining aspect of basically every millennial's young adult experience, it's how they were impacted by the Great Recession. So let's start by addressing what the Great Recession actually was, because for all of our current talk of recession this, are we in one, is one coming, etc., it's easy to forget that it was called the Great Recession for a reason. Quote, the Great Recession lasted from roughly 2007 to 2009 in the US, although the contagion spread around the world, affecting some economies longer. The root cause was excessive mortgage lending to borrowers who normally would not qualify for a home loan, which greatly increased risk to the lender. Lenders were willing to take this risk as they could simply package the loans into an instrument they sold, passing on the risk to investors. And the Great Recession had an impact on the careers of recent graduates that was larger than what would have been expected given the trends observed in earlier periods, even after taking into account the greater severity of the Great Recession. Young people fared particularly poorly between mid-2007 and late 2009, and in studies that we conducted separately, we find consistent evidence that the impact of the Great Recession on new graduates was significantly larger in earnings and employment rates than previous recessions would have predicted. For example, the drop in the employment rate of those aged 22 in 2010 was at least twice as large as expected, according to the findings of a study that looked at people who were born between 1948 and 1997. The effect of entering the labor market during the Great Recession on earnings was also much greater than would have been expected. The negative impact of the unemployment rate on the earnings of those who graduated between 2004 to 2011 was between 2 and 3 times the size of earlier periods, according to a separate study. And this is not to say, by the way, that the Great Recession was not also hugely impacting older generations. It obviously was, and arguably in more acute ways than it was impacting young people just graduating college and entering the workforce. But it's important to remember that the impacts of that recession were much greater than even just your regular recession.